Hi, I'm Patrick Heffernan at Technology Business Research, and I've got a few of my colleagues here today to talk about how we are covering COVID-19. We're going to take a look at the scope of our coverage, and then we'll look at the near-term impacts and some of the longer-term impacts. So to start off, I'll turn it over to Allan.krans.
Great, thanks, Patrick. So at TBR, we're really taking a broad view of the impact of COVID-19. And so we're looking across the different technology categories that we cover on an ongoing basis: cloud and software, hardware, devices, services, telecom. Really all of those markets are seeing an impact. And so it's both baked into our ongoing coverage, as well as we're doing a stream of special reports to really focus in on what's changing almost day to day. So just about every day we have a new piece of analysis coming out. And so far it's ranged from vendor reactions in terms of what the earnings impact has been for companies that have released recently or are starting to give financial guidance on how it's impacting their business, to customer feedback. So we just produced a survey that looked at the impact in terms of IT spending for COVID-19, both currently and in the future. And then we're publishing a piece on manufacturing because they're really at the center of a lot of this. So that should give you a sense for the types of angles we're taking. It really looks at technology, markets, customer behavior, and always the impact in terms of the vendors we cover financially. So within the cloud and software space, we're looking at multiple waves of impact that are occurring. So for a lot of the early, in terms of starting in February and early March, we had all the hardware disruption from manufacturing in China. That's taken place, and we're starting to see improvement there. Really, the next wave of impact that we're right in the middle of right now is the change in terms of spending. So we're at least 3 weeks in for most organizations doing mandatory work from home in the technology space. So a lot of customers are at least remote, if not shut down or laid off in a lot of cases based on industry. So all that's really disrupting the spending patterns that our vendors in the IT industry typically see, right? And so there's going to be a slowdown in terms of transactional revenue with software licenses, hardware sales, things that need to be deployed on-premise. Those are all more difficult in today's environment. We expect to see that as earnings start to be released in the middle of April. In terms of the revenue base, for cloud vendors, there's actually some advantages to the subscription revenue model. So there's a mixture of both pure plays, which that's been part of their packaging their entire lifespan, but also for traditional software companies. We've already seen notes from vendors like Oracle that say they're in a much better position compared with the last financial downturn in terms of more revenue being subscription. It's coming off the balance sheet. They're not seeing that immediate downturn in terms of their business because of that shift over time. One thing that they are going to have to deal with, though, and we're just starting to see the impacts of this, is a lot of these companies looked at their annual in-person event as a big driver of sales pipeline and engagement with partners and customers, and really kind of telling the vision for where they're going to go in the next year from a product perspective. Those are at least shifting to virtual, and we're kind of on the early end of that, as I said, for the spring to early summer event season, and already seeing some difficulties there. Google had to push back their cloud event. They intended on it being done virtually in the next couple of weeks. Just announced that based on the attention on COVID, it's really consuming all of the media cycles and customer attention right now. So even if they can produce something virtually, we're still seeing that disruption in terms of the typical sales and marketing activity. And so it's going to be an evolution in terms of how to get the same benefit from those types of events, do it virtually, perhaps on a shorter time span, and give people back more of their time so that they can deal with the effects of the virus that everybody is facing. Diving a little bit more deeply into some of the customer feedback that we've received so far, a lot of current projects are on hold. We've heard that from a number of the interviews as well as the survey. And in an interview today that I did with a large banking CTO, he said we're prioritizing anything that's related to COVID right now in terms of our spending, our strategy, our time, things that are longer term, migrating to cloud financials, those types of longer term projects are at least going to be delayed. And they said they're going to look at how things develop, make change over time, but there could be longer term ramifications due to both the response to COVID as well as the impact that it's having on their business from a financial perspective. And so longer term, there definitely are threats. So turning just briefly to longer term things that we think are going to change as a result of this response once we get out of this kind of short-term shutdown and disruption. So almost 50% of customers say that as a result of this event, they're going to be shifting more workload, more aggressively shifting to cloud for workloads to be able to free up resources, get things out of their own data center, take advantage of shifting that responsibility and being more flexible and focusing on the business and the response to their customers and their workforce, which is really kind of paramount for most folks. And we're also going to see, I think, continued use of work from home strategies. So that has implications. Again, cloud solutions are great for that because they're distributed. And as long as there's a network connection, you can be able to access and be productive key applications for a lot of employees. So we think those are some of the longer term, some positive, some, I think just accelerating some change that was already in the works. But that's all of what we're seeing in terms of the impact overall and specifically on cloud and software vendors and customers. Ezra, do you want to jump in?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Alan.
Perfect.
I'm ezra.gottheil. I'm the principal analyst for our devices practice, and this crisis has many moving parts. One of them clearly is an increased utilization of remote work, but another is a global recession. And recessions are never good for any industry, but the PC industry is quite sensitive to them because people can defer buying PCs. Most users have PCs. If you've downsized, you have available PCs. Not only that, this is coming at the tail end of a year-long, very positive upgrade cycle based on the Windows 10 refresh. So that selling more PCs is going to face a challenge. However, the working from home movement does generate some sales, both of devices and PCs and Chromebooks, and of peripherals and other associated devices. And that's not just in the commercial market, but also in the consumer market. I mentioned Chromebooks because one of the places where there have been a lot of purchases in the education market, as people are moving their classrooms into a classroom from home situation, school districts and schools are buying stacks and stacks of Chromebooks and getting them out to their students. This is a problem, of course, in that many students do not have internet access, and the solutions to that will have to wait until after recovery. In terms of the PCs that are going out there, an increased reliance on cloud-based solutions, and including things like virtual desktops, means that I think there will be a trend toward a need for less powerful PCs. And because of the difficulty of servicing and supporting devices at home, we think that for some workers, Chromebooks, which can be used for productivity workers who don't need special applications and don't work on especially large and complex documents, might be an answer. We might see an uptick, I think, in the Chromebook space. What we are seeing, and you can see it already, is an uptick in peripherals and even kind of related hardware. So certainly cameras, headsets, larger screens, things like that, but also things like desk chairs. One interesting device that I think will signal a new round of devices is Lenovo has a device. It's not really available yet, but it was shown at CES. It's a 350 device intended to be used exclusively with Microsoft Teams. And we believe that it provides a feeling at your desk at home that you are in a group and you're all kind of working together. It handles the collaborations, but it has video shots of at least 3 others of your workers, and we frankly don't know what the limitations on the device are. And we think that may be a long-term trend. In terms of working from home, that was a trend that was already well underway before this crisis. And the research results have largely been positive. So we believe that that trend will be greatly accelerated by this need to do remote work, especially if the nature of the virus suggests that there will be recurrences or an annual wave of them or things like that. So that is an area of some potential growth. Devices that enable you to work more collaboratively, that aren't in your PC, that are an adjunct, less expensive device. We expect a certain amount of development in the smart speaker space, more in the area of the services available than in the devices themselves, that will also contribute to this kind of thing. Devices are where IT meets the end user. And it's an area where if the end users are in a different place, working in a different fashion, things are going to change. So subject to this large-scale recession and the length of it, we're going to see some differences coming out. More reliance on the cloud, perhaps less need for heavy processing at home, except for the gamesters who may be upgrading their systems to spend more time at their games, and a broader base of users as more and more members of families are using these devices to do their basic tasks. And I'll hand it off now to my colleague, Geoff.Woollacott. Geoff?
Thanks, Ezra. Where we are today, or where we were on, call it New Year's Eve, we're never going to go back. The world as we know it has changed. It's been coming. Patrick and I wrote something in September of 2017 that was entitled The Impending Digital Dust Bowl. And the analogy that was in my head at that time was the idea that the 29 crash, what precipitated it, moving sort of from agrarian to manufacturing, was coming to our economy via digital. And that was I think a tame forecast compared to now when I start thinking of the Civil War and the revolutions of 1848 when mechanization hit. Now, I've been looking at this and being told I was a black cloud of doom for a while. I didn't expect it to come from a health crisis, which sort of changes it up. But the construct of that vehicle was taking a look how social interaction, us as we the people, as citizens, employees and consumers, how that intersects with businesses and what businesses have for activity. And then the third leg of that stool is the public sector and how they establish policy to mitigate the moral hazard of whatever that economic activity is. And as we know, and as we understand, the activity today is not the activity of the post-World War II economy, and our public policy is behind on that. It is, that's the bottom line. So as you look at this and what are the impacts, and again, I'm painting a watercolor portrait rather than Dutch realism insets. That's what our our research stacks do that Ezra and Allan have outlined. But if you take a look at that, and you can go back to 9/11 and take a look at what happened to airline travel after that hit. It bifurcated, and the high-end execs, the CXOs, moved over to corporate timeshare jets to get around the security provisioning. And on the other side, what it did is it forced more web video conferencing. Now, to Ezra's point about consumerization, when we were moving to web video conferencing at 9/11, the only people who really had smartphones were those execs on the corporate jets with BlackBerries. Today, we all have them. So that consumer move to Zoom, to all these things, is going to hit. And what it's doing is accelerating trends that were already there. It'll wash them further over, like the cloud for business continuity plans. And then slowly it'll start to move back. But that's from sort of that social consumer side. We are going to demand the type of consumer experience we have for remote business work and also for public policy. Now, on the business side, what I'm looking at or want to look at is I'm calling it BCAD, the business case, and then after digital. And what I want to see is those firms within their sectors who they may not do well, but they'll do better than their peer group, and then do the forensic audit on their business strategy to see the extent to which being ahead of the curve on digital transformation triggered that. And that'll be a way to take a look for what are the services that firms that are struggling today will need to be able to try to survive and thrive. How are they going to be able to aggregate those who did do the BCAD work and take advantage? I was just reading, all I read was a headline, but that supposedly Azure demand is up 775% right now. So that kind of a move shows those who are ahead of the curve are going to be able to take advantage of this acceleration trigger moment that moves us into that area. And then lastly, on the government side, several different things will be at play. There will be a demand for, I'll call it, consumerization of supply chain and delivery of services. We have a Sears government model. We're going to want an AWS government model. That'll give opportunity to professional services firms. That'll give opportunity for the underpinning cloud enabling layers. And that side should have a short-term boost triggered by the activity. The second piece of that, which is what we've seen as we've talked to those BCAD exemplars or going to professional services analyst conferences, is the establishment of global business rules. And what you need for global business rules is consensus. And what we know we don't have in our public sector right now is consensus. So really, if you want to think of the public sector as a high school, we've got to get them to stop the cafeteria food fight and get into study hall and figure out what are the types of rules and policies and standardized definitions that we need in order to mitigate this kind of risk from coming again. And all of this will continue to accelerate our move into the fourth industrial revolution. It's here. And as I said, 2019 is in the rearview mirror and we're never going to see it again.
Thanks, Geoff. And I'll wrap it up real quick, but just a couple of quick thoughts. One, as we see work from home expand, and we think about, Allan mentioned deployments, we think about consulting, we think about systems integration, and we think about the difficulties of doing that in an almost entirely work from home environment. I think one of the knock-on effects of that will be the degree to which vendors will have to partner more. No one has ever been able to do end-to-end. It's be infinitely more true in this new work from home, whatever this new normal is. And then the second point is, as you know, at Technology Business Research, we look at the individual vendors and we understand what their performance has been, what their strategy is, and we look to where we think they're going to go. We're about to hit an earnings cycle coming up in the next month. And when that hits, I think what we'll be looking for, two things in particular. How direct is the leadership about what's happening within their own company? And then second, who really knows how to lead in this time of crisis? So I think those two things will stand out for us as we look at it. And we'll continue doing this, gentlemen, maybe once a week to let people know what we're thinking about, what's going on, how we're covering it, and where we think it's all going. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.